So let's start from the beginning then. So tell everybody, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Chicago, in the Chicagoland area, the suburbs up there.
I often follow up, as you've seen this show, with the idea of how artistic your family is based upon you. And you're going to be the first one that I already know the answer to that question for, because you and your mother run a service together. But not only that, she, she's artistic because of what she's done in her past. So, and she helped you get your author career started, really. Well, at least get you seen, because she's an expert at that. And so I guess then my question would be, what is it like to have a mother who's accomplished this incredible portfolio of a career? I mean, did you ever feel like, was there a lot of pressure to live up to expectations? Did you feel competitive toward that idea? Or, I mean, what was that growing up around that like for you?
For me, it was really cool. It was pretty much bragging rights, especially when, we'd get together and it would be my friends' parents. And I'd be able to tell them, yeah, my mom took me to the Rat Show when I wasn't even born yet. I just went backstage with Aerosmith with her. She used to run their newsletter, used to draw some of the art for it. That's one of the things when people ask, oh, you guys are qualified at Partners in Crime Book Services. My mother was doing newsletters and they were still mailed out to fan clubs. So it's always been really awesome. I was able to get some great taste in music thanks to her. And it's always been wonderful. And yeah, when I started the author career, she kind of took a back seat to doing a lot of the music promo and just got me out there, got my name out there, got me on so many different blogs and websites and podcasts. And it's really amazing to hear all these people say, well, my parents don't read my books, or they don't like that we write, whatever genre. And she's so supportive. And what a lot of people don't know is she also used to write poetry. So I got a lot of my creativity straight from her.
Is she somebody, I mean, because she worked in the rock industry, so I'm curious. I mean, for the most part, I mean, she probably did a lot of different genres of music and everything, but was she somebody that you kind of looked at it when you were kind of thinking about, being a little darker with your writing, and thus was her poetry kind of in that vein?
Some of it, yeah, but it is her fault that I write as dark as I do, but not in the way that you would think. When I was a little girl, she got me into watching all the Scooby-Doo stuff, all the paranormal, everything, all the classic black and white movies, and it is totally her fault, and I thank her for it because I love it. I can't remember a time when I haven't loved all of this stuff.
What do you think is the most valuable thing business-wise, your mother has taught you when it comes to your author career?
Don't settle. Don't settle. Don't compromise. Don't stay where I'm not wanted or I'm not used to my full potential. It's always to make sure that I'm doing the best for myself and being honest. Because, especially working in the music industry, she saw people sell out quite often, of course. And that was one of the things that I was always taught was be yourself and everything else will follow. And it has.
Who besides your mother do you think was a huge influence? I mean, you said Scooby-Doo, which is kind of funny. But what else was a huge influence for you on your writing career?
My mother and my grandmother both, when I was born, there was a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf of books that were for, infants through age 5, and you're learning how to read by yourself. So I taught myself how to read at my grandma's lap by age 2.5. My mom taught me how to write by the time I was 3. So those were the biggest ones in getting me to love books. But of course, as I got older, there were a couple of other authors, Darren Shan being a big one, Terry Gary, and Ellen Schreiber. Those were the three that I was reading nonstop when I was little, and all of them have to do with ghosts and vampires and monsters and oddities. So those were probably the earliest influences, literary-wise.
A lot of people probably would not know this about you, but you really started with the traditional model, and you decided to be traditional up front. Was it with the Paranormal Detective Series?
Yes.
Which, a lot of people would know because of the 8-book series that's out there. But it started traditionally, and I'm kind of curious what lessons you learned from having that early success, being published traditionally, and how have you been able to navigate your publishing career since then? Because now you're completely indie.
Well, when I was initially published, I actually got the contracts a week after my 21st birthday. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty young, I was new, and I wanted to be traditionally published. I wanted to be, if it wasn't with an agent in one of the big five, I wanted to be with one of the bigger indies. And at the time, especially, CHBB was the biggest one, and I was so grateful when I received that contract. And I learned quite a bit. Definitely learned how to work as a team a bit more, which now that I run box sets and publish those, that's really helped me along. While I was there, I was teaching myself so much more, making other connections, and when it did come time to go completely indie, I did take a lot of things that I learned. I still edit for CHBB, by the way. I'm still one of their freelance editors that they hire for a few of their books. So it was really more of a control issue. I liked having, they gave me a lot of control. I liked doing, all my own covers, and it's just, it feels better for me personally as a writer. Which I think that, if there's a new writer watching this or listening to this, they're going to be able to find out quickly what are they good at, what environment do they work best in. I work best mostly on my own. A lot of other people require that group environment, which is fantastic.
Was it a gateway to kind of partners in crime for you? Did you kind of look at that and go, well, I've got all this knowledge now. I've been gleaming from this, and then going through this, was it kind of a natural progression for you to start your business and then involving your mother with that as well?
Yeah, interesting enough, I actually have to backtrack for that. Before I was published, I was a blogger since I was 17. And through the blog is when we actually originally started doing promotion. At the time, of course, it was free. Promotion, interviews, and that's also when I started editing. So when I went to publishing, I actually quit all of that. So once I went on my own, it did start out into 2019, especially with the pandemic. It did come up as more of a need, but it's also something that we love to do. So it's great that we're capable of doing that. We love our clients who are able to allow us to keep doing that.
Nice. What did it give you that you didn't expect it to?
It's a good question. I think what it gave me was more of a sense of confidence, which I actually have a history with. Most people know I was homeschooled. I started homeschooling from 5th grade on. And initially when I was homeschooled, I was able to do and learn a lot of things around the house. And once I started doing that, it was the same feeling for me of that independence and that strength I didn't realize I had. So when my mother and I started Partners in Crime, it was more of the same and definitely more of an adult feeling that I had. It's like, wow, I'm self-employed, I'm doing this, I'm doing things I never thought I'd be capable of, behind the scenes wise. And it's an amazing feeling.
Is it kind of an extension of your creativity too? Do you feel like that's kind of something that you kind of clamor for, is more creative space and outlet?
Definitely, especially doing the covers, the teasers. I've been studying graphic design since I was about 17. And I've been doing it more and more and trying to better myself. And I'll tell my mom all the time, and I've even told a couple of different clients, it's like, I love editing. It makes the analytical part of my brain happy. But when I do covers, it's the creative part, and everything just comes together, and it's a really wonderful feeling.
Another thing that I really, in learning about you, and we've known each other for a bit, but I really didn't, and I knew that we've talked about this before, about mental health issues and things of that nature, but I really didn't know how deeply you were embedded in that, and how much it means to you. How much do you credit that creativity and writing that helps you cope with that? Is it kind of a medicine or a distraction for you in that regard, or and what does it mean to have that creativity for someone struggling with mental health?
It's both a distraction and an outlet for me, because depending on what I write, all of my stories, they jump around with emotions a lot. And I just finished my very first sweet romance under my pen name, and that was a wonderful distraction of just a lot of fluff and happiness and Christmas joy, which is not something I typically, but it's a very good distraction for that. When it comes to being a medicine, when you read my books, a lot of my characters suffer from anxiety, PTSD, depression. John and Never Again, Angelica and Danny both in the Paranormal Detective Series, Harley and her father Salem in the Coven Series, they all suffer from something or another or a combination. And writing them is a great outlet, because where sometimes when you do have certain mental illnesses, it gets hard for you to decipher the different emotions or to recognize them. So when I write, it helps me to get those out, to organize them, to sometimes pour them into my poor tortured characters and let them suffer for me in a way. But it's always been an amazing help for me in many different ways.
I know you've done one-offs. I know you've done short stories and novellas and things of that nature, but you tend to think in series, and I'm kind of curious from that mindset, why? What is it about series that you gravitate towards? And is it just you get to a point where you're telling a story and the story grows, or do you always have in mind that there's going to be a series? Where does the idea of series fall for you?
With the exception of the Paige Papillon Paranormal Mysteries, which is full series will be out in 2022, I never had the inkling to do a series. The Paranormal Detectives was originally a standalone horror novel, which was going to be like 20,000 words more.
Mm-hmm.
I wound up thinking, oh, wait, I can do a sequel of this, though. So I cut the entire ending arc. Angelica was actually supposed to be the bad guy at the end of the first book, which obviously she can't be since she's, through the rest of the series. So I cut that down. I'm like, okay, there can be a sequel. I'm writing the sequel. And it's like, oh, wait, the villain isn't dead yet. Guess I have to do another one. Okay, this will be it. Then I thought again and went, okay, I guess I need 2 more books. And then I realized there was a little loophole that I wanted to exploit. So there went 2 more books. And then finally, I'm like, I have to do this. And it ends. It ends now. But the series would not end. Yeah. And eventually, when I wrote my publishers, I was still doing trad at the time. I'm like, I have more books. And she said, bring it on. As many as you want, as long as the readers want them. Same thing happened with the Coven series. It was a standalone novel, The Coven Princess, period. And I turned it in, gave it to the publisher, gave it to my mother, gave it to my ARC readers, and I got messages one after the other. So when's the next one coming out? I didn't give you a next one. I don't have a next one. But the good thing was with that, I had 85,000 words that I cut from that book. I cut entire character arcs, I pieced it back together. So I was able to take that, and somehow it went to a 5-book series based on just the things that I cut and the things that I wanted to expand upon. But I don't read many standalones except for Stephen King. I prefer series. I've always preferred series ever since I was little. So I think that maybe is part of how the story just keeps going. I was just having this conversation on Twitter with another author. Too many storytellers, especially American storytellers, are stuck in the 3-act arc of beginning, middle, end. Whereas I grew up with series that didn't have beginning, middle, end, so linear. I grew up with a lot of anime and manga, which has 4 to 5 arc stories. So that is naturally what I like to write, and I think series are more conductive to allowing me to do that.
You alluded to it earlier. Music has played a big role in your life, and talk about how it plays a role in your writing. You do something really unique. I don't know if anybody, if you've never read anything that Lily does, she tends to put her playlist in the front end of her books, in a lot of her books, and I thought that was really unique. That was something different that I hadn't seen before. And so tell everybody why and what the role music plays for you in your storytelling.
Music's always been a part of my life and my family's life since my grandmother was a little girl. She was a ballroom dancer. I had friends who were drummers, family members who were drummers as well, and all the friends, of course, exes who are musicians. And it's just we've always been around music for generations now, and all different sorts of music as well. Which sometimes you'll see on the playlist. I'll have like a Backstreet Boys or something very weird come through all these hardcore metal songs.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's something about music. It's such a different form of art that makes you feel things. You know, what I might take 80,000 words to tell someone, a musician can do in 5 minutes or less. And it's just such an amazing art form. And I honestly don't know if I'd be able to keep writing as much if I didn't have the playlist that I make, because I envision my books as movies. The playlists are the soundtrack. And then with Never Again, Sean is a rock star. I finally made my paranormal rock stars, and I would actually love to do more of them. I want to expand upon Sean's story, but with different characters, because like music and writing is just so intertwined for me.
I mean, what was the idea behind publishing the playlist, though? Why did you feel like that was necessary?
I was actually talking with someone else, with another author at the time, and she had mentioned, you could put your playlist in, you can't put the lyrics. I'm like, wait, yes, I can. So it was just on that suggestion that I decided to start doing it. And other authors do as well. Mm-hmm. Not as many, but some of them.
I thought it was brilliant. I just love that. It kind of gives you a sense of what you were kind of, what you equated to at a certain scene. You can kind of, it's almost like those old puzzles where you had the song on the one side and the artist on the other, and you had to draw a line to who sung what song kind of idea. And it's kind of the same thing. What scene goes with that song, right? So
I love that imagery. It's in my head. I love that.
Also, another thing that's been a big influence that you already talked about as well, which is your early horror and macabre influences. And what do you think those taught you about storytelling that you use in your writing?
The number one thing it taught me was pacing. Not downing, of course, modern horror writers, but a lot of the newer guys are around with wanting gore and shock horror, bizarro. And I enjoy that stuff too, of course. I love a good gutting or beheading. It's great. But a lot of people don't do the pacing anymore, because a scene that is supposed to frighten you, supposed to terrify you, supposed to make you shake or make you have nightmares, it's nothing if there's not a proper lead up. And a lot of the classic horror novels, films, TV shows, they all had build up. They had that suspense that you could feel, even when there wasn't, music to bring those feelings on cue. There was always something there, something that made you have goosebumps go on your arms. And that's what I always took from them, was the sense of pacing that I do feel has slowly gotten lost in modern horror.
Do you look at those films and art and TV and all that and the books that you remember so fondly? Do you look at them any differently now than you did back then, and now that you've become a storyteller? Is there's something different about them when you revisit them, if you do?
One of the only things that's different has nothing to do with the storytelling, but rather as an editor, I do somehow see, especially, some of the really bigger ones, I'll see where they allowed them to use filler words, or where they allowed them to slip from a close POV to omniscient POV. And that was actually, I just saw a post about that the other day. So I see that now, but the ones that I truly loved, when I go back and reread them now with a storyteller's eye, I'm realizing why I loved the things I originally loved, because I'm seeing all the tricks that were put into it. And it's really, really fun rereading them now, knowing almost what the author was thinking or feeling or where they wanted to go with it. And it's a very unique sensation, and I love it. And I will keep rereading pretty much as much as I can come by, even stuff I read when I was like really little, just to have that knowledge, have that feeling.
Does anything get stale for you? Do you feel like there's some things that don't hold up as time goes by? And is that something that you would learn from in your own writing?
There are some books that I feel don't hold up because they dated themselves. And mostly not the ones that I enjoyed, but just ones that I would read, maybe if it was for school or just because I felt like picking it up at the library. Rereading them now, I can see where some of the dialogue was dated or stilted, compared to, but a lot of the ones, especially, you know, the authors that I mentioned earlier, they stood the test of time, you know, rereading them. Oh God, it's like 16 years later. Wow, that's a long time. And, you know, they're still just as good as they were when I was 12. It's nice to see. It's also nice to notice that quality. And again, that's something that I would look at as a writer now and say, okay, this book had staying power. How? And I can figure out, you know, is there something that I could change, that I could fix, that I could work on for myself?
You said something interesting. I found how you said you look at your books as movies, and I'm curious if horror movies and darker films kind of lend itself. Was there something about them that you gravitated toward visually that you think it really helped you translate your books into that kind of visual element, that idea of them being a movie?
Funny enough, it actually wasn't movies that did that. It was watching all of the anime that I did. A lot of my stuff, especially the Coven series, I see that as anime. That's the style that's in my head, those type of movies. You know, Paranormal Detectives, I see more, you know, Zack Snyder Justice League style or Underworld style. But initially, when I started visualizing everything in my head, it almost all came in an animated form. So that's kind of what I credit with giving me the visual eye that I do in particular. Lily, and I am here today to read a little bit from my latest book, Never Again, which is a standalone spin-off of my Paranormal Detective Series. This book focuses on Sean, a male siren introduced in Book 5 of the Paranormal Detectives called Last Rites. You don't have to read any of those in order to read Never Again. You can enjoy that just on its own. A little background of the book: Sean is semi-immortal, so he's lived for a few centuries, and he lived through World War II at this point in the book where I'm going to read to you. And during World War II, there were a specific type of demons that I made up that the Nazis set upon in the concentration camps that eat souls. So in this scene, it's 2017. He's at the beach. He's had many tragedies occur within the past few months, and this now sets him over the edge to what will be the main focal point of the second half of the book. And this is all done in Sean's point of view, which is actually only my second time writing from that type of point of view, so I hope everyone enjoys it. Walking along Lake Michigan, I stood at the water's edge and let the cold spray hit my face, smelling the water, the smog, and the cigarette smoke, even though you couldn't legally smoke at Lake Michigan anymore. Beneath that was the food, the vendors walking around the lake, even though it was starting to get cold. There was no late Indian summer for us this year, but I didn't mind. Let the winter come early. The leaves were already turning an array of reds, oranges, and yellows, but they had yet to fall from the trees, making the city look striking and colorful. I decided to get back on my motorcycle and take a drive down River Road heading towards Rosemont. The thick foliage always improved my spirits. It was hard to imagine what Danny was going through, because he loved Angelica more than I, and her loss was impacting him in the worst way. If I felt this hopeless, he must be in some earthly version of hell. I had lost my best friends, my career, and the woman I loved all in a single month. After having nearly 20 great years, I was right back where I was before I found the band and Angelica. Lately it seemed I was on edge even more. Was it just my mind, or was there something strange going on? Then again, it is Chicago. There's always something strange going on.
and what you do, because you've got a lot out there. You've done a lot in a short period of time, and that's really impressive.
Thank you.
And I'm curious about. Let's just start from the beginning. Who's the first character you created, and how have they influenced everything or shaped everything and every character you've created since?
Oh, that's a good question. One of the first fictional characters I created was they were both unnamed. It was for a first grade short story, and it was my take on a mix of the Woman in White and the Phantom Hitchhiker myths. And neither character was named. Both of them were mistrustful, deceitful. I was 7, but those things, they definitely carried through, not only for the creepy elements, but for the you don't always get to know my characters right away. Sometimes I don't even know them. I've been in the middle of writing a scene and I'll type something up and be like, wait, when did that happen? There are a couple things where I've just sat there staring at the page like, my character didn't tell me this. I made them. Why do I not know this? But yeah, it's really an interesting thing to think about, because I never would have thought of something that far back as something that could still be. Yeah, I guess I've always had the same style of creepy, strange, and secretive.
Do you like the reveal process? Is that something you covet? Do you like giving everybody a little bit of nugget here and there and then holding back a little bit too?
Oh, definitely. I don't plot. So sometimes the surprises that the readers get, they're surprises for me too. And the Paranormal Detective Series is the best example of that. Like I said, it started out as a standalone. I really had no plans. But something that I picked in particular for Angelica Cross's name, the reason is finally revealed to who she is and why she is at the end of the series. And I didn't know that when I started writing. I had no idea what her ending would be. That's always fun.
Which is interesting because it was only supposed to be one book, and then it turned into 8. So
right, yeah, every single book was a surprise.
The other thing that you mentioned a lot in other interviews and things of that nature is how much you covet diversity and representation in your characters and your books, and you've even touched on that in this interview already. About giving your character some mental health things to deal with. But when it comes to getting them into the story, how much are you thinking about what kind of character the story needs versus what kind of character you're looking to write about? Is there a difference there for you, or is which one do you think you gravitate toward more?
Really, neither. When I'm starting to craft a character, but they come to me sometimes before the stories do. So I just have characters who are kind of sitting there. It's like, okay, your story will come to me. But again, that goes to me not planning anything. In the Paranormal Detective Series, Danny, who is my male lead, comes out as demisexual, which I didn't know. Mm-hmm. In the same book, I find out that Mark, who was a minor character, was bi. I always thought he was gay. He was bi. So it's just, I like to have as much diversity as I can because the world is diverse. The world has different races, different colors, different religions, and many different sexualities. And especially, my stuff being set in Chicago and the cities, you're going to have that diversity. Mm-hmm. Whenever I hear someone say, well, I've never had, whatever friend, insert whatever word you want there. Mm-hmm. And I see them living, more of a metropolitan area. I'm like, either A, you have and you weren't safe to come out around, or B, you have lived a very insular life. Because I've never really noticed anything different when I was hanging around all different people. And that's how I want my books to be. I want my characters to just be characters. Their stories are not technically going to be about their sexuality or their race or their religion. They're just going to be. They're going to exist just like, we all exist. There's a discourse that goes on, mostly among heterosexual authors. Why do we need to have a gay character? What should their story be? And what all of us queer authors reply is they don't need to have a story because they're LGBT. We exist. We don't exist for a plot point, you know. So that's why I want the statement that I want to make in my books. Whenever you see someone who is not, you know, straight white abled male, you know, I want people to know everyone exists and they don't need a purpose. They just need to be here.
So you're careful about dancing around stereotypes and things of that nature, then.
Yeah, I think I've written one stereotype, and that was probably Fiona, my villain in books 1 through 3 of Paranormal Detectives, where she was a very like 90s girl, Britney Spears type, bubblegum girl, I guess is a good way to put it. Yeah, I think she was the only one who was a straight up stereotype, because I've never actually known too many of the stereotypes in real life, so I don't even have anything to draw off of to make these characters.
You mentioned that you create the characters first. Was there ever a character that you wanted to have that was diverse that just didn't fit into your stories? And have you been able to kind of get them into stories since then?
Close. Paige in the Paige Papillon. Originally, I thought for sure that she was going to be a lesbian. That was how I envisioned her, and then I started writing it. It's like, okay, wait, no. Her best friend is, but why can't she date her? Oh no, her best friend's gonna have a girlfriend that's introduced in book 2. So this was more of a character telling me, no, this is who I am. You're my friend's the one you're looking for, in a way. And that was very interesting. I don't know if I've ever had a character do that before, but Paige is very unique. I love writing her, kind of for that reason. She speaks up right in the narrative.
Where do you feel like a character really takes shape for you? When do you feel like you're comfortable with them?
Never. I've never been comfortable with any of my characters. They're always all loose cannons. I think the only one that I've really been able to know was Salem Sinclair in the Coven series, because he was my original main character for the series. It was supposed to be his standalone book. And then I wound up creating Harley instead, so he was relegated to a lesser POV character. But I think he's the only one that I've ever really known very well who hasn't surprised me anywhere down the line. I knew what he was going to do. I knew what he was like, and it was very easy writing him for that reason. But it's very strange when you don't know your characters and you're wary around your characters. And I know some authors can agree with me. I've talked to them. And then there are other authors who cannot comprehend this. And whereas I'm going around like, you know your characters? How do you know how?
Do you feel like there's a reveal point when they reveal something to you, though, that you kind of maybe not know? And like you said, you're usually surprised by it. But do you feel like you're comfortable with them revealing that because you kind of are in the story a little bit more? Do you feel like that happens? Or is it still uncomfortable in that respect?
Yeah, when there are things that they reveal to me, it's usually an excitement. It's like, you know, number one, yes, I'm getting to know you more, and number two, you know, I can expand your story in ways that I didn't think of, which is basically how it happened and how my series came to be series for that reason. It's one of the best parts of writing for me. It's so much fun.
Your paranormal detective in a lot of your stuff, and if not all of it, it has the backdrop of where you grew up in Chicago. I mean, I'm curious how you look at setting in your stories. I mean, do you consider it another character because you know Chicago so well and you can imply that?
Oh, it's definitely a supporting character. Despite the fact that my Coven series is mostly set in Scotland, I actually do have part of book 5 also set in Chicago because it crosses over with Paranormal Detectives. But yeah, the city it's a character on its own. I lived in Los Angeles for 8 years. You know, I had a lot of fun out there. But, you know, my mom and I both, there's something about Chicago, it draws you. It is almost a dark sort of magic that the city has. And, you know, when I'm writing the stories, I'm able to take pieces of the city and insert them into the characters. You know, there's one scene where Angelica says, it seems like the city can feel her emotions. And that really does happen when you live here and when you're a part of the city. It is dangerous. It does have that grit and that edge, but I think all good cities do. And it also has so much history and home and family. It's a wonderful place. It's a beautiful place. And I don't think I could think of anywhere more fitting where I could have my biggest series set, and probably most of my future books. The Paige Papillon series is also set here. But instead of like Paranormal Detectives, it's set in more of the residential areas to sort of fit the theme more of cozy paranormal, as opposed to gritty urban fantasy. So that's another thing about the city, is there's so many different places to go and see. You know, you could read 3 different books set here by 3 different authors, and it wouldn't even be the same setting.
Chicago's one of those rare places where it's like a badge of honor to have been from it. People wear it on their sleeve a lot. And I'm like being from New York, or being from Texas, kind of idea. And I'm kind of curious if you like incorporating that into the storytelling aspect for you as well. Do you feel like a lot of people defend Chicago a lot of times, and do your characters defend it a lot more than you probably expected them to?
Yeah, not in the way that I expected. I have another standalone with Angelica Cross, Vampire Blood and Iron Bullets. And she has to go, it's mostly set in LA and Hollywood. And she goes around realizing while she's in LA, these are people who talk poorly about my city, but, the alleyways, even in the tourist areas, stink of urine and fecal matter, and there's homeless lying all over the street. And she's shocked. And it is a shock that, kind of mimicked mine when I first got out there as well. But yeah, she does sort of defend the city, and in a way, some of the demons that come in later in the series, they do represent some other real people who demonized the city, and it was nice putting them in their place fictionally. But for the most part, with Chicago, I don't make them defend it too much, because they're mostly surrounded by other people who love it as well, and there are other people who have fallen in love with it after traveling.
Do you like to give little nods to certain places like in Chicago that only Chicagoans would know? Do you feel like that's a necessity for authenticity purposes more so than even the storytelling aspect?
Is it a necessity? No, I think that I'd be able to keep it to, the touristy areas that people can Google right away or would know off the top of their head. But for me, being from there, I wanted to write them going to, the same little places that I went to. It's more just for me. And yeah, of course, if someone's reading it who's been there, I would hope that they'd be able to get that little bit of excitement, like, wait, hey, that's where I used to go. I used to buy records there. I used to buy cookies there, whatever. But I actually was just posting about this on Facebook. In Never Again, Sean meets his band by getting the Illinois Entertainer, which is a free newspaper, and they used to have it at Rolling Stone Records. They might still. I actually haven't been back there since the pandemic, but Rolling Stone Records is this really funky record store that's been around since the early 1970s, possibly the late 60s. I'm not entirely positive. And my grandmother used to go there. My mother bought her first 8-track there. She bought her first vinyl there. I bought my first cassette there, when I was little. And we've met so many bands that have gone there, and it's a Chicago staple that most people have no idea is there unless you live in Chicago. And that was one of the places I knew had to be featured, as well as a couple of the restaurants that we love here. Because Chicago food is definitely unique.
I was going to say, there's got to be at least one reference to a Chicago dog or a deep dish pizza in there, right?
Of course, multiple. and an Italian beef. And our cannolis here. Of course. That's another thing in Never Again. The family that Sean rents a room from, I made them own this pizzeria called Villa Napoli, and that's the place that we went to my whole life, since before I was born. So yeah, just certain things I wanted to put in there for my nostalgia, and hopefully to maybe even make people curious and want to go Google, and they'll go visit more of a mom and pop place when they come visit.
You mentioned the Coven series takes place in Scotland for a good portion of it. What was it for you did you want to challenge yourself with that, or is it just the natural starting point for what you were trying to write about? I'm kind of curious, what about Scotland was it that drew you to writing about it?
Inverness Castle, which is where the story is set. I was looking up, I knew it wanted it in a type of castle-like location. I was originally looking at outside of London. I was also looking at Germany at the time, but I didn't want to set it somewhere where people had another language that I did not know a single word of. Yeah, I found Inverness Castle on my searches, and it was so beautiful. And where it was located from the town of Inverness was perfect for what I needed. So, but I cheated a little bit where the town is completely made up surrounding the castle, so I didn't have to learn streets or I cheated. I did a lot of extra world building, so I didn't have to do any studying.
Another thing that's really interesting is, you like embracing dark themes and dark ideas, but there's also this kind of idea that you're kind of almost exploiting the darkness to kind of get to the light almost, and then now you kind of gravitated toward like YA and Cozies, which are in its own sense a little bit lighter fare. Is that a maturity as a writer kind of idea for you, or why do you think you've kind of moved toward that a little bit?
It's mostly really what I'm into. YA, especially YA Paranormal, is my first love. Again, going back to the authors I mentioned, like Darren Shannon, Ellen Schreiber, that's what I grew up with. Those were the things that I loved, and I'm always going to love writing about unconventional kids in unconventional situations. It's something that even a lot of adults still relate to, because YA novels can have these emotions that sometimes adult novels will skim over, but that adults still feel. So it's always nice being able to write something that can cross over between the ages, but allow younger readers to have fun, allow older readers to maybe get a few hints of things that they might not get if they were kids. Mm-hmm. And the same with the Cozies and the sweet romance I just finished. That was another thing I grew up with, were a lot of cozy mysteries. I inherited my mom's Nancy Drew books when I was very little, got the rest from the library. We actually still have a box set here of them. So those were all just things that I've always loved and I've always wanted to try. So I figure I'll try it. If it hits, it hits. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I always have other things to fall back on. I don't know. It's just something about stretching your wings, making sure you're not pigeonholed. I write under the banner of urban fantasy. My horror goes under that. The Cozies go under that. But I don't ever want to be a one-note author. I don't want someone to look at me and say, oh, yeah, she's the girl who writes vampires all the time. Or, I want something vast and lasting.
I'm also curious about, because of you loving macabre and you loving darkness, you might have a unique perspective in this sense too. We coddle kids a lot and give them what we expect them to understand, but they understand a lot more than we give them credit for. And oftentimes when I was a kid growing up, like I read Dune. That was like the first thing I read when I was a kid, which is crazy for a young kid to absorb something like that. And it pretty much fucked me up for the rest of my life. But that being said, I mean, I was never, my parents never said, don't do that. You're going to make your own choices, your own decisions. And I'm kind of curious, do you feel like when you're doing these YAs, and like you said, it's important for you to be yourself in writing, especially that the little bit of darkness you add to it maybe is because it's you, and that maybe kids would gravitate toward that more because it's unique and different? Do you kind of feel like that a little bit?
Yeah, in a way, definitely. Again, the books that I mentioned reading that were released like in the early 2000s, some of them didn't get as popular as their contemporaries because they were so dark.
Yeah.
The Demon series being one of them. That was, was aimed for 11 and up.
You were reading when you were very, very young too.
Yes. But that series being aimed for 11 and up, a lot of parents didn't want to buy it for their kids.
Yeah.
Because it was horror.
Yeah.
And, I have to be thankful I had a mom like your parents were, where it's, I would like to read some of the material first, or if it came to music, she would like to read the lyrics first. But it was always, she trusted me. She trusted my judgment. She trusted the way she raised me. And that was, the important thing there. And that allowed me to spread my wings and see what I enjoyed and what I didn't very young.
All right, let's explore the happy happy part of Lily's catalog here. What do you think is unique about Paige for you as a character, and what do you like about writing her and exploring her?
She's my first entirely neurodiverse character. Some of them have the elements of it, and certain things, especially Nick in the Coven series. He has ADHD. I do not have that, but I do know how to write it in a way. Mm-hmm. But writing her with such a unique mindset while still being in the third person POV, it is almost a breath of fresh air in a way where I get to know her. She negotiates with me in a way. I get to put things on paper, especially how she would solve the crime is not typical for how a lot of sleuths would, because most of them, they would be calling, emailing. She doesn't like people. She doesn't like to talk to people. The people that she does work with, she basically tells them straight out that she is uncomfortable. And that's something else that I would like a lot of people to read, because I think, I have severe anxiety, severe social anxiety. I prefer to work by myself. Mm-hmm. I would always have liked to have seen a character who would have to do that would only have a few trusted people, which she does. And so writing her, it's my hope that a lot of people will see themselves in her and see their methods in her. And it makes me happy to write her and to write her the way that she is, very unapologetically herself. And this is a series that, while it's not YA, kids can definitely read it. So I really hope that people will see, especially young girls, see themselves in her.
Do you put a lot more into certain characters because you have a deeper connection with them, or do you feel like that's the opposite? You kind of keep them at a distance because you know them so well.
It depends on the character. With Angelica, I always like to keep her at a distance. I feel it's safer that way. The closer you get to Angelica, the more skeletons you discover. With Harley and with Paige, I like to keep them close. I kind of coddle them a little bit, despite the fact that I've put Harley through absolute, utter emotional hell. But yeah, I do. I like to. It depends on the character. Sean was another one I liked. He actually liked staying at a distance. Uh-huh. But funny enough, one of the characters I distanced myself from, he's almost a universal favorite. All of my ARC readers, even my mother, everyone loves him.
The idea that you are giving them, mental health issues, or they're having mental health issues, does the death of a character then resonate a little bit more? Is that a different experience, killing a character with that, than you normally would?
There's a big difference depending on the character, what the reason was. Not spoiling it, but there is one character whose life has almost always been to fight. And at the end of the Paranormal Detective series, I kind of take that fight away from him when he dies. And that was probably the hardest death I've ever had to write. I mean, I've done some really brutal ones, but I did play off of his mental state. That was very difficult. And it was also the death that hit the most of my readers as well. That was the one where I got messages like, why? Like, because it had to happen. I didn't like it either. Whereas when I killed one of my villains in Paranormal Detective series, I had one of my ARC readers messaged me on Twitter and wrote, "Ding dong, the witch is dead." I'm like, yeah, that was definitely a feeling I wanted you to get.
When you get an opportunity to really sink your teeth into a character that you're going to kill, do you feel like, I'm going to put a lot more effort into, maybe subverting the character or changing the perception of the character just so that I can just stick it to him, not only for myself, but for my readers a little bit?
Some of them. One of the deaths that happened in Paranormal Detectives Book 4 was definitely one of those, I'm writing and I'm going to drink tea with Satan while I bathe in the tears of my readers. It was one of those, despite the fact that it hurt.
Yeah.
It was still one of those deaths that I knew was going to hurt, and I wanted it to. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the Coven series, Book 4, the Coven history, at the end of the book it's a death that was actually supposed to happen in Book 1, but it wound up not happening. And I knew this death was coming. I knew this character couldn't survive until the end, but it was one of those, just heart-wrenching. Writing it and knowing it was coming. I wrote the scene first just to get it out of the way. I couldn't live with that on my conscience because it's a character I came to love so much. And it's a character that, while readers didn't particularly like him. They didn't hate him either, which was my goal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wanted to make there be someone, you know, yes, this is a good guy. Yes, this is someone who's also a jerk, but he has such a big heart. And that was kind of the whole thing of that, was to bring him closer, to make his death more emotional. Whereas with the other character, it was, you're going to get to know him just enough to love him, and then he's going to be ripped away from you.
Oh, fun we have, right? The fun we have.
Yep.
I'm also curious what it is about crime that you gravitate toward. Why is crime such an interesting backdrop for you in your stories?
Oh, that's a multi-layered answer for me. My family's always been involved in law enforcement.
Uh-huh.
My grandfather was a police detective, and he became a captain. My mother worked for the court system. My grandmother was a secretary for some of the politicians as well, which kind of, if you're in Chicago, goes into crime, which I think
Right.
everybody knows that.
Yeah.
So that, and then it goes to, my analytical brain likes looking for clues, likes coming up with suspicions and theories. So that's just fun for me. And again, it goes back to reading, you know, the Nancy Drews, the Babysitter's Club mystery series. That was something I loved when I was little. And it all just comes back to things that I enjoyed and always have and always will. While my tastes evolve and grow, the basics of what I love have always stuck with me. And that's really part of the reason that crime is so much fun, because it's something that I enjoy on different levels. You know, not committing it, but you know, especially all the true crime and stuff. I love all of that. You know, there's all these rumors that the Vatican has this area where there's like vampire blood and secret texts,
exactly
and
what you're talking about.
that's what I'm using. So that's going to be so much fun. If you're talking about weird crimes, my family, they lived down the street, or 2 streets over from John Wayne Gacy when he got arrested, right from that house. That's where they lived. And before I was born, when they used to go on their yearly vacations to Los Angeles, our accents, a lot of people can't understand us, which I don't know if you can tell, I'm really trying to pronounce everything. So when my family would go out there, and my mom always loves telling the story, they would ask where they're from. And also my grandmother was very dark skinned. Her and my mother both had Afro curly black hair. So they'd also ask them what their nationality was. So they would hear, we're Sicilians from Chicago. And everyone would flash back to Al Capone and get creeped out. And that was just, when we wound up moving to LA, I saw almost the same thing happen. And it's weird how there's such a stigma, especially in a place that has such notorious gangs as Los Angeles. You know, you tell a New Yorker you're from Chicago, they don't bat an eye. Oh, hey, that's awesome. Yeah. You tell someone from LA, it's a whole nother ballgame, and it's so amusing just to see people's reactions.
So you're heading into this new venture, this Cozy Mysteries. You're about to release a bunch of them with Paige, and I'm kind of curious what people can expect from her and the mysteries and the adventures, and maybe something you can share with us that you haven't talked about before with it.
There's going to be a few things I haven't talked about as much. Number one is she's also my first asexual character, which you discover in book 3. Number 2 is there's going to always be a weird crime. You know, it's going to be something that people have to go to her for. It's not always going to be a death, though. Book 2 is, as far as I know, not going to have any death in it. It's going to be a catnapping. It's a paranormal catnapping that makes her have to get her job. And, but yeah, it's a huge part of wanting to write is me wanting to write strange deaths that could also be kind of amusing, or strange situations that wouldn't fit into any of my other works. So she's going to be the place where I dump a lot of weirdness, which is okay, because cozy mystery readers like a little weird. They like a little strange. They don't want, you know, oh, this guy got 2 in the chest.
They covet it. They really like wear, like we were just talking about, people from Chicago wear like that a badge of honor. Cozy mystery people wear that like a badge of honor.
Yep. And of course, you know, one of the books is going to be a poisoning. That's my favorite type of death to write. So of course there's going to be one of those. And the 5th book, there's just going to be death, but the crime that they're going to investigate is technically a resurrection. Wow. And it's going to be the only of, well, 4 and 5, they're going to deal with some dark magic. And it's going to be really fun to show, okay, you brought They didn't bring someone back to life, but I can't say it without being a spoiler.
All right.
But it's like going the opposite way, where you think this would be a good thing this person did, but instead it's causing a lot of death around the city. So now they have to fly to the Vatican to actually find the root of the problem. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
Is this kind of like one of those things where you can go back to and keep going as long as you want it to go, or do you have an exact plan of where it's going to end?
Both. It could keep going even beyond, but I want to end it at book 5 because there's something that Paige is going to do, a situation she's going to be put in, that her mentor Vera, who is a big part of the stories, Vera was put in the same situation 7 years before. And it's this particular situation that I am going to have Paige navigate in such a unique, Paige-like way that none of the other characters could, that I think would be a good stopping point. Where it's like, you know, she's going to have more cases, you know that she'll go on. But unless it's short stories, I don't see myself going any further with, 40,000 words plus for her.
What does every Lily Luchesi story have to have in it?
It has to have a strong female character, even if they're not the main character. It has to have a little bit of darkness, a little bit of weird, and a lot of love, which I know, based on all the things that I've said, that's not something you're going to think about, right? But that's something that is put into every one of my stories, whether it's love for a person, love for your job, your family, whatever the reason. All of my main characters have a deep-seated love. That is something that I hope resonates with a lot of the readers, and something I could not write a book without a passionate character. I don't have anyone who's aloof or who's, I really don't want to do this. Like, a lot of the main characters try and be cool. Mine aren't. Mine are in there. They're in your face. They're passionate. They're obsessive. And that's something that all of my books are going to have.